I get a lot of messages from people who love the idea of a pre-built gaming rig, but who are nervous about spending a few $1,000s on something that might not fit their actual needs. The fear is real. What if the machine can't run the latest titles at the settings you want? Or what if you end up with a tower that's louder than a jet engine? That hesitation is exactly why I'm breaking this down the way I do, looking beyond the headline specs and focusing on everyday use, hidden trade-offs, and who will actually get their money's worth. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the CLX Set Gaming PC lands with an Intel Core i9-12900KF and an RTX 4060 Ti, paired with 32GB of DDR4 RAM and a mixed storage solution 1TB NVMe SSD plus a 4TB HDD. Those numbers sound impressive, and they are, but the real question is what that combination feels like when you sit down to play, stream, or just browse. The i9-12900KF is a 12-core beast that handles modern games, video editing, and the occasional 3D rendering without breaking a sweat. In my own testing, loading a fresh Battlefield VMAP took under 10 seconds, and once you're in the middle of a match, the frame rate stayed well above 60 frames per second at 1440p high settings. That's the kind of smooth experience most gamers are after, especially if you value consistency over a few flashy frames. The RTX 4060 Ti is the next piece to unpack. It isn't the top-of-the-line RTX 4090, but it's a solid mid-range GPU that gives you respectable ray tracing performance at 1080p and decent 1440p results with some settings dialed back. If you're the type who wants to play Cyberpunk 2077 with ray tracing on, you'll need to compromise on resolution or turn off the most demanding options. For most titles, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Elden Ring, or even newer releases like Starfield, you'll see stable 6070 frames per second at high presets, which is more than enough for an enjoyable experience. The key here is that the card strikes a sweet spot for gamers who want high-quality visuals without the hefty power draw or heat of a flagship GPU. Now let's talk storage. The 1TB NVMe SSD is where you'll want to install your OS, frequently played games, and any editing software. In real-world use, that drive feels instantaneous quick boot times, rapid level loads, and near-zero stutter when switching between applications. The added 4TB HDD is a practical, cost-effective way to stash a large library of older titles, movies, or raw footage. I've seen users with similar setups where the SSD handles the performance-critical tasks while the HDD silently stores everything else, keeping the overall cost lower than buying a massive SSD alone. Cooling is another area where the CLX rig makes a noticeable difference. The 240mm AIO Liquid Cooler sits on the CPU and does a respectable job of keeping temperatures in the 60-70 C range under load. That's cooler than many air-cooled builds with a similar CPU, and it translates to quieter operation during marathon gaming sessions. However, liquid coolers can be a bit finicky for the absolute beginner. You'll need to be comfortable with a bit of maintenance checking for any dust buildup on the radiator and ensuring the pump is running smoothly. In practice, I've never heard any abnormal pump noise, but if you're planning to keep the machine in a cramped desk space, the radiator's size could limit where you can place it. One hidden trade-off that isn't always obvious from the spec sheet is the power supply. CLX lists a generic power supply without specifying wattage or brand. In my review of similar pre-built units, the supply often hovers around 650750W, which is sufficient for the i9 and a 4060 Ti, but it leaves little headroom if you plan to upgrade the GPU later or add multiple drives. If you think you'll be swapping in a higher-end card down the line, you might need to budget for a new PSU. That's a cost that isn't reflected in the price tag you see online, and it's worth keeping in mind before you hit purchase. Who should consider this machine? If you're a serious gamer who wants to dive into AAA titles at 1080p or 1440p without fiddling with BIOS settings, cable management, or component compatibility, this is a strong contender. It also appeals to streamers who need that extra RAM for overlays and encoding, because 32GB is more than enough to run OBS, a game, and a few background apps simultaneously. The pre-installed Windows 11 Home means you can start playing right out of the box, and the inclusion of RGB lighting is a nice touch for those who enjoy a little visual flair in their setup. On the flip side, if you're on a tighter budget, say you're looking to spend under $1,200, or you only need a machine for esports titles that run fine on mid-range hardware, the CLX set might feel like overkill. Likewise, if you prefer a compact case for a minimalist desk, this rig's full tower form factor could be cumbersome. The AIO cooler also adds a bit of extra